Hello and welcome to the debate at PTV World. I'm your host Sana Maqbool. In today's show, we're going to be talking about Yom-e-Istisal, which is being observed across the country to register protest against Indian unilateral actions of the 5th of August 2019, when India revoked the special status of the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir to something which is now divided into two territories under direct control of New Delhi. This is, of course, something which is not acceptable. It is not part of the international law, norms and traditions, and of course goes against the UN Security Council resolutions and the special status it has accorded to the area of Kashmir. The important aspect, of course, is that it has been almost 5 years since, and since then, we have been seeing that the suffering of the people of Kashmir has continued. We have seen that the demography of the area has been deliberately changed. And of course, there is also increased militarization in these zones. There is, of course, a lot of concern to the entire conflict in itself in terms of the resolution that is still lacking after many decades have already passed, despite the fact that UN SC Council resolutions exist. Pakistan, of course, has reiterated these calls many times previously, has called for dialogue, has called for dispute resolution, again something that was echoed by the Prime Minister of Pakistan earlier today. Yet we have seen that there hasn't been a response coming in from the Indian side to sincerely resolve this issue according to the aspirations of the people of Kashmir and their right to self-determination. Instead, what they've done is take unilateral action such as that of August 5, 2019 and others to deliberately change the area and to making sure that the Muslim majority is converted into a minority. This, of course, is incredibly condemnable and also puts the lives of the Kashmiris at risk. We've seen generations suffer at the hands of the Indian occupation forces, and therefore this must end. Today we're going to be talking about the struggle of the people of Kashmir, the unilateral actions of 2019, and what the international community must do when it talks about the issue of Kashmir and how exactly Pakistan will be able to put forward its stance. This is something we're going to be taking a look at in our show today. For this and more, as always in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal, and we've also been joined online by former Ambassador Mr. G.R. Baluch and Brigadier retired Mr. Waqar Khan, who's a senior analyst. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us and being part of the debate today. Ambassador Saab, let me start with you with what we've seen, of course, across decades in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, is that what the people of Kashmir want, what their right to self-determination is, hasn't been granted to them, despite the fact that this is something that the international law, the international resolutions provide. We've also seen now that as part of the 2019 unilateral actions, there has been increased change in the area and more forces in order to occupy the area and, of course, militarize them further. And this has led to, of course, severe suffering of the people of Kashmir at the hands of these forces, and, of course, a lot of human suffering and violations that we've seen have existed for quite some time now. Pakistan, of course, has put this forward many times before, but I want your take, particularly when we talk about the unilateral actions on 2019. Even if we disregard the number of years that have passed as without the resolution of this dispute, why is it that we've also crossed 5 years since the unilateral actions of 2019, something which was so blatantly against international norms and laws?
Well, time, of course, never stops. It passes. Events happen, and we have no control. But what we want to reflect on as to the event, why did it happen? And could it have been prevented? If not, what were those triggers which made the adversary to take this route that it took? I think India, by revoking Article 370 and Article 35A of its own constitution, has done wrong and of course against the UN Security Council resolutions enshrined in the UN resolutions, has violated not only its own constitution but also international law. In fact, now there's a greater body of even some legal experts who are advancing this opinion that Indian federal government or the central government could not abrogate it, because the Article 370, I think it's clause D of that 370, that it can only be amended if with the consent of the Constituent Assembly of the state, and there is no Constituent Assembly in existence. As such, it was all arbitrary, it was authoritarian, it was malice, it was bias, and it was a illegal action taken by the BJP government. That be the case. Second, coming on to the international law, if you look at it, when India itself went to the Security Council, took the issue there, it means that the issue, it was a disputed territory, and the Security Council in its collective wisdom passed a resolution, for a plebiscite, a free and fair plebiscite to be held, after which the Kashmiri citizens would decide for their future. So India has violated these two. Now we have to look at it. Is it just a arbitrary extremism that BJP has been following? Or there's something more to it? What I have come to now believe, increasingly so, is that it is just not a small aberration or extremist action, that unthoughtful action by BJP that we perceive that they've taken. But I think there are geostrategic and geoeconomic implications of the revocation. There are geostrategic interests which India wants to protect, and there are geoeconomic interests that India wants to protect. Now we can go on and further unwrap this, that Kashmir kind of is situated at the center of China, Pakistan, and India. And if you look at it, the geopolitical situation now, China being the emerging power, and now India being groomed to checkmate China as a preeminent power in the world, I think there is something more to it, just the BJP decision to revoke it. Because what India wanted to do was to get a strategic control of this strategically vital geographical location of Kashmir. Because by doing so, it, of course, at one time, while it kind of unchoke our water resources, at the same time it gives it an advantage to forestall any efforts for the connectivity that China and Pakistan wants to embark upon. In fact, I would even say that perhaps it is a strategic kind of countermeasure to CPEC, because CPEC to BRI basically, because CPEC is a vital component of BRI. So I think it is not targeted against the Kashmiri people alone. It is a strategic move to respond to what would unfold in the coming years. As we know, India's aspirations, as we know what's happening with the global positioning of various forces. So I think India has a geopolitical interest, and of course geoeconomic, in the sense that it will be able to disrupt the connectivity between Pakistan and China, hence to Central Asia, and it wants to have its own access to the Central Asian markets. So it's a whole cobweb of geostrategic and geoeconomic interests that India wanted to protect by revoking Article 370 and 35A. Yes, Sana.
Absolutely. Brigadier Waqar, I want your perspective on this as well, particularly when we talk about the actions of 2019 and what the Ambassador Saab has highlighted. While, of course, this is something that's illegal, this is something that's not acceptable as per the international law, When we talk about the practical realities of the area and the way that the people of Kashmir are experiencing these realities, it is important to also take into account what is actually happening on ground. And what happens on ground is that we have seen that this action was taken. It was also then supported by the Indian Supreme Court, and then we saw that there have been changes with regards to the demography of the area, with regards to settlement within this area, all of which of course are part of these unilateral actions, including dividing the area into two territories that were going to be ruled by New Delhi. While of course this can be claimed internationally, as we have always been claiming with regards to the UN Security Council resolutions as well, that this is not acceptable, at the same time it has happened, and it is something that the people of Kashmir are suffering from. So I want your perspective in terms of how do we practically change the situation on ground and are able to ensure that the people's lives are different. Because while we talk about something happening against the law, there should be a consequence involved in order to stop any action as part of that change. And it seems that after this revocation, all of the changes that India had aimed to achieve have been done without any consequence.
I think India has operated in 5 domains as far as occupied Kashmir is concerned. I'll take it from where Ambassador Baluch mentioned. One is, of course, legal, as he said, violation of bilateral agreements, violation of international law, like UN resolution, and then somehow I don't give too much weight to 370, 735A because that was basically Indian, arrangement with the occupied Kashmir. But in any case, there was some commitment for the people. That's why the nationalist or the pro-Indian leadership is also annoyed. Then came the demographic change that they are trying very hard.
Brigadier Sahib, sorry to cut you. We can say that about 370, but 35A actually predated that. 35A was a commitment to the people of Kashmir that their property will remain, will belong to them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but ultimately it was an arrangement, I think, with the Dogra Raja and, of course, later on with the Abdullahs. My point is that there are other, efforts being made, like demographic change. If you look at non-resident Kashmiris being brought in, although it's not been very successful, but there is, and then comes the, cultural assault on the Kashmiri life and their faith and culture. And then we have basically, geographical division, as you mentioned, into it was actually downgrading of the state into union territory, and basically Ladakh being separated, and now there is an effort to further split Jammu and the valley, the occupied valley, into two more dominions. And then I think most startling thing is the genocidal approach. Mr. Ranganathan was one of their social scientists. I think in June this year, with Sumisha Prakash mentioned that why don't we adopt the Israeli model, because we've seen what Israel is doing with Gaza. So basically an element of fear and genocidal policy. So basically there are two rogue states. One is Israel, who is doing genocide, then is the fascist state under RSS in India. So this is how it is. But I feel that there are two main stakeholders. One is, of course, the Kashmiri people, and then people of Pakistan. We can keep trying horse for support from international community. I think it's going to come to whatever extent that we've been able to draw, even the OIC. Mainly it's going to be ourselves and the Kashmiri. The only thing is that we should not tire ourselves, because these movements for freedom, they go on for decades. And if you, I just quote example I always mention is the Sikh, Sikh movement, and
What
how they
support do
are
you look forward to from the OIC? You mentioned the OIC. I want you to qualify that, please, and tell me what support do you look forward to from the OIC?
Yeah, OIC, I think we expected a lot of support because it used to be on the main agenda, but gradually, I think because of geostrategic and geoeconomic reasons, the sport has actually, I would say, become lukewarm. So ultimately, it's ourselves. Now, I was just, linking it with the Sikh movement for Khalistan. They don't have any international dispute in Indian Punjab. They don't have a state as such. It's a couple of guys in the Sikh diaspora, and they put so much pressure on India through basically social media and their campaign that India was then forced to send, death squad. Now here we have the government of Azad Kashmir, which is supposed to be the liberation camp, the government of Pakistan, the foreign office. You have a very strong, vibrant Kashmiri and Pakistani diaspora, like in UK, 1.5 to 1.8 million Pakistanis have basically a Kashmiri origin, generally, if you see, and in North America, and they're doing very well. So it's basically in case I think we can combine our effort. I'm not saying that there's been no effort, but we need basically a constant and persistent, policy and effort in information domain. That's what we can do. Then, of course, diplomacy is to be left with the Foreign Office, and you need aggressive diplomacy. And there are ways we've seen in Bangladesh how people, when they rise, they can overthrow a fascist regime, within a week actually. So, and now if you look at the simmering currents south of Pir Panjal, especially if you look at occupied Kashmir, south of Pir Panjal range, there's a simmering current which is now, blowing up. And Indian military establishment is very much worried. They're actually blaming Pakistan and coming up with absurd stories that probably SSG had penetrated 600, SSG officers and soldiers. But mainly it's the indigenous, uprising in Jammu, Riyasi. These are, hotbeds where there was no question that basically they expected, Muslim youth rising. And these are like Udhampur is the command headquarter of the Northern Command. So in these districts, you find, simmering currents and, Indian military being targeted. And in case it also start resonating in the valley, so you have, already have a frustrated youth in Kashmir because they know that they have been disenfranchised. So it's just matter of, supporting this movement through information, through social spaces, and using the diaspora. I think it can be revitalized. And Pakistan may be having some economic and diplomatic challenges, but something this is not something which is not surmountable.
Right, absolutely. Faisal, I want your perspective also. When we talk about what Brigadier Saab mentioned is that at the end of the day, it's the people of Kashmir and Pakistan. That's extremely important because, of course, Pakistan has been putting forward this stance since forever and on any and every platform that it can possibly do that. And so, of course, have been the resolve coming in from the people of Kashmir who've been fighting this for generations. But while we talk about other elements that can be involved, such as the OSCE, such as the international community in general, such as the UN Security Council, why is it that we don't have the kind of support that we would require or the kind of action that is needed on ground to change the situation? And in reality, in light of all of what we've seen in the past many decades, how much can the resolve of the people of Kashmir, can the support by Pakistan actually amount to in terms of changing lives? Because we've seen that while, of course, we reiterate this of every year, we talk about this at all platforms. We have been observing Yom Istisal even since the past 5 years. I want to understand then what exactly will be the impact that this can possibly create. Is it creating those ripples? Is it penetrating through the other channels and communities that can actually make a difference?
Sana, when it comes to whether there will be, any impact in coming days or coming months or years, to me, I think the impact would only be created when the support of US for India in the context of China will be reduced, because India is needed by US as an ally in the region, as a policeman of the region, as we have been seeing that the Indian naval forces, they have been getting too much of a support from US itself and US Western allies. They have been, of course, investing in Indian Navy, Indian naval forces. Reason, because they want to keep China busy with the help of India in the South China Sea, because East China Sea is already busy with the presence of US troops in South Korea and then US troops in Japan. But when it comes to India, of course, it is keeping China busy in South China Sea. So unless that that aspect of regional security is always there, of course, we will be seeing that they will be getting diplomatic favors from US, and wherever they need to tighten somebody's noose in the Middle East or elsewhere, they will be using US diplomatic influence to, of course, pressurize their allies in Gulf countries or Middle East or elsewhere. But when we come to Indo-Pak, and earlier, especially, Ambassador Baluch highlighted a very important point, and that is related to where does Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir exists right now. Of course, in the middle of 3 nuclear powers, and if we take if we add up the population of all these three countries, it's almost 45% of the population of the world. I'm talking about China, India and Pakistan. All them countries, they are encircling Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir right now. And if we take the example of what India has been doing in recent past, especially after the abrogation of 370 and 35A, of course there is head-on with China at eastern Ladakh. Of course we know that Pangong Lake that once was with the Indians, now it's not with them anymore. And in eastern Ladakh, of course Chinese build up and from the Indian side build up as well, increase in the forces. This shows that they are head on of course against China in there in Ladakh. And I would I would endorse this this statement that of course they have of course divided into three now. They have already done so, because the steps of demarcation which we saw taken by India itself very recently last year, demarcation was pointed towards of course knowing the facts that what should be with Jammu and what should be with Kashmir. And in that context, of course, one example I would give is of Anantnag, which by Muslims is called Islamabad. The district is called Islamabad, but of course by the Indians is called Anantnag. Anantnag is the southeastern district of Kashmir, but now they have demarcated it with Jammu. Reason being, it is famous for Amarnath Yatra, and this is where of course people, Hindus from all over India, they come there and they do the yatra. Why they are doing at this time? Because they themselves know that in coming future, if there is a two-front war with China and Pakistan, and if there is a situation like where they have to step back from Kashmir, then they would only be doing it from Kashmir, and they would coming to terms with Jammu. So they would like to retain Jammu, but of course Kashmir itself is so troublesome for them that for future they might not do so, or maybe the grip is so loose that they themselves know that once the time comes for two-front war and American ships are lost somewhere in one of the seas of the world, and they are not reaching in time to help India, then in that context of course Indians would be happy with retaining Jammu. But so far, if we take the look at what Pakistan is doing right now, whatever Pakistan has done so far, it's to the par, I must say. It is to the par. Why? Because whatever is required by Pakistan, wherever is required by Pakistan, Pakistan does so. But when it comes to of course people who are fighting inside, now even Indian geopolitical analysts, they have started coming to terms with it, that the resistance which they are facing in Jammu and Kashmir, of course the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, that resistance is homegrown, and that resistance is entirely from the people of Indian illegally Jammu and Kashmir. Reason being that their loved ones who have been seeing tyranny of Indian rogue military's presence in this area, of course they are coming up with these resistance and whatever is going on in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Yes, I support it. Pakistan morally supports it, because this is their resistance, and even United Nations Charter, it allows us to support any resistance, known resistance which is taking place, even if it is elsewhere, as long as it is a resistance that I endorse, I should be supporting it, and even to an extent that it should be supported with the arms. But of course Pakistan is not doing it with the arms. Pakistan is simply morally supporting it, and that's how it should be.
Right.
One last thing, Sana, I want to mention here, and that is something earlier I was thinking about whether I should be doing it or not, but whether it is my my place to say it or not. But I would request to my leadership, be it military, be it civilian leadership, I would request them that if India is igniting our western border by investing in TTP, by investing in BLA, BLF, we should by all means, wherever it is required, be it Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura or Khalistan movement or wherever, that should be supported by Pakistan. And I was one of them who actually,
and when you say supported, what do you mean?
supported in any way, because
With
what
arms?
we with arms, why not? If India is doing it by defensive offense, we should be gobsmacking them with the same tit for tat. And once I was in talks with, obviously in my journalistic capacity, I was in touch with one of the Khalistan movement leaders, and he actually came up with the idea that wouldn't it be possible for Pakistan to allow us some land in Islamabad where we can actually have our embassy in exile and their government in exile somewhere in western country, and they can have their embassy, even if it's one room embassy in Islamabad, that should be allowed of Khalistan, that should be allowed for Mizoram, Manipur, and wherever there is there are 32 fault lines, all them 32 fault lines, they should be welcomed in Pakistan. That's what the resolve is.
All right, and Farrukh, I really want your perspective on that, whether or not that is something that we even should be thinking about, or whether or not it will be impactful or beneficial for the people of Kashmir or for peace in general. But also add to that, while we talk about efforts that Pakistan has made, of course, it has reiterated this stance on every platform. It has spoken about the plight of the Kashmiris, and of course, it has engaged with other members of the international community. But I want your take also in terms of the efforts with regards to India itself, and whether or not there can possibly be something through this channel that can actually help us achieve the peace that we're looking for.
Right. Which channel are we talking about?
India, Pakistan.
India, Pakistan, bilateral, right?
Yes.
Look, Sana, first of all, regarding this tit-for-tat competition with India and somehow actually leveraging whatever fault lines are, the biggest problem in actually viewing every conflict through the lens of geostrategy is that the human cost, that becomes a serious issue. And that is what shows in Kashmir's issue as well. Right now, I mean, there are pictures upon pictures. They're counting. Pakistan released a dossier a few years ago about use of chemical weapons by India in Kashmir as well. But we are not basically talking about that. What we are talking about is how China, America, and all those factors actually play in. But my humble submission is that our first allegiance is to the people of Kashmir, right? And we have to, instead of actually looking at how to weaken that country or this country, what we have to see is how to help the Kashmiris in surviving whatever they are facing. And this whole project, Sana, the biggest problem, I've been very consistent about Kashmir. In 2014, people were saying perhaps when hardliners come in India, there's usually peace in between Pakistan and India. And I kept on pointing out that don't allow the example of Vajpayee to fool you, because Vajpayee was a very different man. Modi is not Vajpayee, he is not even Adani, he might be, but he is not Advani. Right? With that kind of state of affairs, you have to realize that in 2019, before the elections were taking place, I was repeatedly on this channel and the twin Urdu channel, I was repeatedly pointing out that the moment they come into power, they are going to do away with Article 270 and 25A. And my concern at that moment also was that 25A essentially is the continuation. Removing it is the continuation of the basic ethnic cleansing project in India. And we have seen that happening, Sana. I remember in 2014 writing consistently about quoting M.S. Golwalkar's book, We Are Our Nation Defined, and in that he actually praises Hitler. He was the second Sarsang Chalak of RSS. Since then, RSS has actually evolved. It has included, it is no more a Brahman club, it has branches that include women and that includes Muslims and everything. But where the problem lies, if you want to see Modi's 2007 book called Jyoti Punj, or otherwise beams of light, in which he writes, he dedicates a chapter to MS Golwalkar, and he says that Guruji, they used to call him Guruji, Guruji never actually told you what to do. He showed you what to do, right? The whole project was ethnic cleansing and disempowerment of Muslims. In India, that continued. But the problem with Kashmir, Indian Kashmir, occupied Kashmir, right? By the way, so much emphasis on illegally occupied. I haven't heard, legally occupied a place, right? I think that whatever you have occupied is illegally occupied. But regardless, Indian illegally occupied Kashmir, the problem was that that was the only Muslim state. So how do you change the complexion of that? The first thing is do away with Article 370. Then, as was pointed out by Ambassador Saab, there was a huge manipulation of law and how things actually transpired. Then the second one and the most effective one was do away with Article 35A. Through that, you can allow the settlers to come in and take over property. Then what did you do? Of course, there has been this Kashmiri Pandit issue that has been there, but what they are doing is, because those people were angry, they were displaced, and they are being settled back, it is essentially in shape of colonies, that they won't be actually mixing up with the local population, and that's how the anger remains in the system. Then something else happened. Now they have actually come up with their domicile law. With that, they have actually issued a lot of domiciles to whom, Sana? They have issued domiciles to people who were displaced, or families of those who were displaced in 1947 from Pakistan. So they are also the people who are actually very angry with Muslims, right? Or for that matter, South Asian Muslims, how they are. So settling them would actually not only change the demography, but it would also change the emotional temperature of the valley and elsewhere. With that kind of a state of affairs, repeatedly I pointed out there is incredible violation of human rights. But India, because it has so much diplomatic power, and then don't forget that the essential ambassadors I was talking about BRI and CPEC. Let me also point out what is India's response to BRI. It is Adani Group. Through Adani's invasion and takeover of the country and then the world practically, they have allowed so much space to the man that he keeps on invading everywhere. Sri Lanka was not playing ball, government gone. Bangladesh, government, its leader went to China, government gone, right? And that continues. And they do it in a way that in the end, you end up blaming the other side rather than them. So with that kind of state of affairs, the only thing is that Kashmir is going to become a property corridor for Adani and his likes. And that's why Wanchuk, the person on whom, one of the very interesting characters was based in the other part of Kashmir. I mean, they bifurcated, and the other union territory that they made. There, he has been actually protesting because their land is being possessed and given over to these billionaires. With that kind of a state of affairs, you can know that what you need is, supporting Kashmiri people in moral ways possible, and then keep on arguing, because any fascistic government that is there cannot last forever, Sana. We have seen it all over the world. Why is it that Germany failed? Why is it Nazi Germany failed? Why is it that fascist Italy failed? Because fascists can go for temporary measures. In the end, holding power can last for many years. It has lasted for 5 years. It won't last forever. Okay. And when it comes to bilaterals between India and Pakistan, I mean, I can talk to a person who is looking at me. If someone has turned his back and continuously abusing me, how am I supposed to talk to them?
Right.
This is the state of India right now.
Absolutely, and that is of course important, and I'm glad there is hope. But Ambassador Saab, I want your take also when we talk about engagement with India. Of course, we've seen that in the aftermath of the unilateral actions of 2019, Pakistan had put across this prerequisite, of course, of the reversal of these unilateral actions before any dialogue could take place. And of course, the offer to dialogue has been given by Pakistan time and again, and we've seen even the current Prime Minister do so. So I want your take on whether or not this can be something that Pakistan can look into, and what sort of direction can this dialogue process possibly take, and can it involve a discussion around the unilateral actions, or will it require the reversal of these actions? Because it seems that previously, of course, the issue of Kashmir itself was something that was needed to be as part of the table for this dialogue to take process, and now, of course, these actions of 2019 are also there on the table. But what exactly will be the way forward, and what Pakistan takes a look at this issue?
Yeah, being a former diplomat and my firm belief, even otherwise ideologically, on the peaceful course of action when it comes to resolution of political issues. And I think South Asia is due for a peaceful environment. It has been 75 years. We have fought 3 wars with India, separation of East Pakistan. And I think as for the human development indices, I think after Africa, I think South Asia has the lowest, or perhaps almost in some of the indexes, we are probably at par with the African countries. So is it that we are condemned, South Asia is condemned to be living all the time in poverty, underdevelopment, mutual bloodshed? No, I don't think so. I think we have to build that peace lobby, that narrative building. So I think I would like to go that there is a possibility. In fact, potentially there is a critical mass of people who believe in the magic or the sanity of talking to each other, negotiations, resolution across the table, not on the battlefield. In India. So I think we have to tap them. We have to go and talk to them, and then of course there is maybe the world is polarized, world is very biased, but still there are some countries which do listen to the voice of the reason. So I think we have to build a innovative narrative for the Kashmir issue, in my view. It's just not only the Kashmir. Of course, they are at the center of the entire issue of Kashmir. It's about their identity, about their preservation of Kashmiriyat, as they call it. But at the same time, I think the resolution of the Kashmir issue is connected to the prosperity, stability, and I think peace in this region now and in the times to come. It has been 75 years since the partition or what we call independence of Pakistan and India. And Kashmir remains the wound that keeps bleeding both the countries, and continue to do that. There's a resentment. There is waste of so much of resources. So I think there is a need to give a new impetus to peace. And there are several such proposals on the table. Not that they've been just lying with us. If you look at it, several peace proposals have been discussed with India. When the former president, former President Musharraf, he went with his 4-point formula. It had a lot of potential for peaceful resolution of Kashmir. And there are several other. So I think here is the time to come up with a narrative that Kashmir is not only about, of course, it's about Security Council resolutions, it's about the Indian Constitution itself, but that is the legal anchor on which the issue is to be framed. But I think issue has to be further enlarged to connect it to the future of this 1/4 of the humanity, as somebody brought it, that India, China, Pakistan are 1/4 of the population of the world. So I think we have to reframe, enlarge its scope, look at its implications, and perhaps there could be even I would tend to propose now that perhaps China, Pakistan should come up with a framework and talk to India that how to proceed, because it is very much linked to Ladakh. Again, an issue between China and India. So I think there's a need for us to have several approaches. Of course, bilateral approach, we already have agreed, both the countries in Shimla agreement, that we shall discuss, we shall resolve all issues, including Kashmir issue, bilaterally. But it does not preclude our referring these issues to the regional like organizations or international organizations. So I think there is a need instead of uh, bellicose statements coming from us to station one or two other descendants in our on our territory. I think our I think from here the sound bites of peace have to go, not peace on their terms, peace on principles, peace of what's called mutual honor, mutual respect, and a peace which sounds rational. So I think I know it's very difficult to respond to an irrational regime with rational reasoning and arguments. Yet I think the history tells us ultimately it is the rational approach. It is the approach based on principles.
Absolutely, and this is a very important point that you have just mentioned, and I want Brigadier Saab your take on this as well, because while we of course want to and have been taking the rational approach, it seems that we are dealing with an irrational player, and so I want your perspective on whether or not it will be possible to actually engage with them in the manner that Ambassador Saab has also pointed out, and whether or not we can have the kind of support from China that he mentioned. And add to that, that if this fails, and while it has successively failed previously, we have seen that at the same time, while we talk about these issues, while we wait for some sort of rationality to exist, the people of Kashmir are suffering. Do you propose any other solution that you are in favor of, or do you think this is the only way?
And Brigadier Waqar, if our enemy is of course irrational, then to make him rational, should we be twisting his arms?
Yeah, I think there could be alternate approaches. I think definitely diplomacy has its own place and this should keep working. I'll just make a small little alternate view on what was said about Adani and its power to change in Bangladesh. Incidentally, Asina Wazi landed in, I think, Tirupura, Agartala, sorry. And basically, India is crying that probably ISI got it on the lighter side of it. So I think we should not be giving too much credit to Adani to bring change in a country like Bangladesh. This is my view. Now, on the issue of, I think, if
If
you
you
look at
listen to
even
their narratives, they are not sure whom to blame. In the end, it is something that has served their interest. And this is the great thing that she ended up in India also.
yeah, because China was a bilateral visit. I think it was a routine visit. My point is that even before Modi came, if you look at Indian geography, it's South Asia Indo-centric, and no country actually shares border. So somehow, if you look at their relationship with China, they had one war and one skirmish. Pakistan, 4 wars. With Nepal, they have water dispute. Kushi Dam, Sri Lanka, they had intervened. They have intervened in Maldives, and then of course, who's left? I don't know. So it means that basically India had that DNA problem of not it could have been magnanimous, and it could have, and when Modi came, things I think went from bad to worse. And although I would love to follow the approach proposed by Ambassador Baluch that we should, but I think so far till the time BJP is there, it's very difficult. And if you look at it, I think like Doval advisors like Doval who basically talk offensive defense, but when it comes to asymmetry, there's a different approach. Like Pakistan, India skirmish in 2019, Pakistan fought back, being a smaller power. But in Ladakh, India backed out. So basically, it is like the Hans, either he's at your throat or at your feet. So these are, I think, DNA problems with India. They have to look at into it. I think we look at dividends of peace, TAPI, IPI pipeline, and connecting this region with Central Asia, Middle East. India could have a lot of benefits. It's understood that in case peace prevails, $100 billion trade could be achieved between Pakistan and India. But unfortunately, that's where we are. And I would, I think, go with my friend who suggested that we should have an offensive defense approach because if they do it, we have to resort. Till the time, I think we can put some sanity in the mind of Modi and his cabal.
Right. Thank you very much, Brigadier Waqar Khan, for joining us and being part of the discussion. And thank you very much, Ambassador G.R. Baluch, for being part of the debate as well. Yes, Farrukh, very quickly.
Very quickly, I just wanted to point out, of course, you can read whatever is happening according to your own outlook, but my humble submission is that at this moment, whatever is going on in the world, even America's president, the way American media actually cornered him, my concern is that this is Modi's last year in power. And at that time, they are really going to push for something like Akhand Bharat. If past is any proof that I have been correct on their approach, my humble submission is Pakistan has to go for a waiting game until he is ousted. And secondly, you have to actually be very sure to protect yourself, because they are going to use all the defensive offense on you. It is not offensive defense, they call it defensive offense, but you have to endure that as well.
Right. Thank you very much, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for joining us and being a part of the discussion today. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll now see you tomorrow.